McDonald's, the fast food juggernaut and long-standing symbol of all that is Americana, has had a merchandising presence in a multitude of kid-friendly markets, such as clothing and toys, including the signature Happy Meal tie-ins with popular sports figures, TV shows, and of course video games of the day. With the burgeoning success of Nintendo and Sega in the early 90s, led by their iconic mascots, it was only natural that the company wanted to dabble in the low-risk, highly profitable field. I mean, there were releases for home consoles based on the Noid, Spot, and the Kool-Aid Man. Why shouldn't the king of the food chain have their turn in the 8-bit spotlight? As every retro gamer knows, they got their chance, and the result was the infamous MC Kids. You probably didn't know that this failure was not the only attempt by the company to grab a hold in the thriving industry, and 2 more titles were released for the Sega Genesis. One specifically where you can play as the clown himself. McDonald's Treasureland Adventure, released in 1993, published by Sega, and developed, fittingly enough, by Treasure. This is another case where I didn't really know anything about the game, saw it at a local secondhand shop, and made a blind buy based on the cover alone. Looking at that colorful artwork, my first thought was that it would be akin to Barney's hide-and-seek game, a completely innocuous, fluffy, educational title. I was pleasantly surprised to find that this treasure has some substance to it. Story notwithstanding. The title sums up the premise of the game perfectly. Ronald finds a piece of paper under a tree, deduces that it's a piece of a treasure map, and decides to go on a quest to track down the other parts. That's the story in entirety. It can be summed up in one sentence. There are 3 pieces missing, meaning there are 3 levels with 3 bosses to beat. Okay, I'll admit that there really isn't much to the story in this game, but story has always been secondary or even tertiary to gameplay in cartridge generation gaming, and that's where this game gets my nod. McDonald's Treasureland Adventure, in a bid to conform to what was hot at the time, is a platformer similar to Magical Quest. Ronald's attack isn't a weapon like a staff or bow and arrow, but magic, which is controlled by the B button. Jumping is performed by the C button, while the A button shoots out a series of interconnected scarves from Ronald's sleeves, which attach to hooks located around the stages, which Ronald uses in ascending to a higher platform and for zipline daredevil acrobatics. Ronald's moves are very much like Mickey's in the classic Capcom Super Nintendo game. Coincidence? Yeah, probably. You can really tell this is a game for the console that the Hedgehog built right from the first level, which looks like it was created from the Green Hill Zone mold. A later level even has those shifting platforms from the Chemical Plant Zone in Sonic 2. Derivativeness aside, the game never really feels stale. The color palette is bright and cheery, with excellent music and a diverse group of enemies, from mustache gnomes, crazy caterpillars, and stoplight sumo wrestlers, to the slightly terrifying gymnasts who pass Ronald back and forth, ensnaring him in their feminine feint. McDonald's Treasureland Adventure isn't afraid of venturing into nightmare-inducing territory, and I've got to give it up to Treasure for that. Even the levels themselves contain plenty of challenges and fresh spins on well-trodden designs. Besides the Green Hill clone, Ronald boards a train, goes island hopping, and even takes a trip to the moon. Each level has roadblocks and obstacles unique to the type of terrain. For example, while riding on top of the train, Ronald has to duck to avoid overhead obstructions. And later on in the same level, in the city after the train crash, the road breaks apart and descends into the abyss from the stomps of the Spotlight Sumo. Perhaps most psychotic of all, our clown hero uses the heads of bunny ear-wearing ballerinas as platforms to reach the next train car. I'm not sure if that's the craziest or most hardcore thing I've ever seen. Mario and Sonic never leapt off tutu-clad tiptoers to collect coins or rings. He may be a charitable giver at heart, but the red-nosed Mr. McD isn't afraid to crush a few spines to get where he needs to go, and I salute his massive cojones. Speaking of that, Ronald actually starts off the game on the puny side, with only 4 out of a possible 7 health jewels and a weaker magic attack. Power-ups are available from a store, which are purchased via bags of gold, which increase your G meter. These strength-boosting items include the life item, which increases the total health bar by 1, jewel refills, balloons, which act as a safety net against missed jumps and pitfalls, the aforementioned magic power-up, and extra lives and continues. On the topic of continues, they are limited to 4, but passwords are generated after pretty much every screen, so even if all the continues are spent, a simple 4-character password will get you back where you left off. Being a McDonald's game, the familiar cast of characters all make an appearance, including the Hamburglar, Birdie, and the Grimace, who comes off as dumber than a box of rocks. While the latter is completely useless, the first 2 are actually quite handy, helping McDonald get out of tough situations. In fact, it wasn't until I spoke to the Hamburglar, whom I accidentally passed by the first time, that I was able to obtain the strategy to beat the first boss, and every other boss for that matter. Initially, I kept on shooting out magic attacks, which had no effect whatsoever, and getting mightily frustrated in the process. I later learned from the Hamburglar that the beams the bosses emit act as a vacuum meant to ensnare Ronald's jewels. In doing so, the bosses finally become vulnerable to the magic attack, and being bombarded with a bevy of blasts, end up forfeiting their piece of the map to Ronald. Before you could say, "I'm loving it," McDonald has all of the treasure pieces to complete the map, and discovers that the highly sought prize is located on a moon. But they don't know how to get there. With the help of the professor, the gang launches into space on a Golden Arch branded rocket ship, soon thereafter crashing into their destination. For no particular reason. The moon level is the most complex of all, testing out the Scarf skill to the max, with Mega Man-like platforms that will drop Ronald with one badly timed jump. In the changed gravity, McDonald can jump much higher than previously, but be careful since there are spike ceilings to rain on the parade. After traversing the troublesome lunar surfaces, you'd expect the final foe to be this big burly evil dude. But the last battle is against an adorable little green guy with a fire-shooting wand and a multi-tiered revolving door setup that reminds me of Monsters, Inc. I kind of feel bad for harming the tiny cutie. He doesn't look all that dangerous. I bet all he needs is a big hug. That'll make him feel better. Well, as it turns out, I was kind of right. The little green man is the keeper of the treasure. He was attacking McDonald because he thought he was going to take his gold. Well, that and the fact that he's a creepy clown, and who wouldn't attack first when confronted by Ronald McDonald? Anyway, Greenie concedes defeat and says that the treasure is McDonald's. Ronald takes pity on the fella and states that he doesn't want his treasure, only to find a way to repair the damaged rocket and head home. Wait a minute. The point of the game is to collect the missing map pieces in order to obtain some unknown legendary treasure. You're gonna tell me that McDonald and Company traveled all that way, risking life and limb, ruining scarf after scarf, only to have a change of heart in the home stretch? So, the ending that you get after investing a couple hours of free time is basically the same as not inserting the cartridge in the Genesis at all and staring at it in silence, trying to perceive hidden meanings like it was Guernica. Doesn't this completely negate the reason for playing it in the first place? Greenie is amenable to this and creates a rainbow bridge for our merry misfits to trip balls on all the way home. The moral of the story? Ronald McDonald, beloved icon of children all across the globe, uses ballerina skulls as his preferred mode of transportation. I never thought I'd say this, but there are none more metal than Ronald McDonald. Lemmy looks like Pat Boone in comparison to Metal McDonald. Well, even though you leave off pretty much where you started, McDonald's Treasureland adventure is definitely worth one playthrough. With a multitude of memorable tunes, eccentric enemies, and intricate level designs, this 16-bit offering is a textbook example of the adage, don't judge a book by its cover. Underneath that warm, bubbly exterior lies an acid trip experience that will etch a permanent mark on your soul! For the better, of course, because this game rocks like Metallica and their Ride the Lightning Prime. McDonald's Treasureland adventure needs to be seen firsthand to be believed, and, dare I say it, just might be considered a Genesis hidden gem.